Marvel has given us some of the greatest stories in the history of comics. And some of the most catastrophically, jaw-droppingly, how did anyone approve this, bad ones. I don't mean bad like a weak fill-in issue or a slow bridge story. I mean comics that broke beloved characters, betrayed their readers, ended careers, and in some cases caused measurable damage to the entire industry. Today, I'm ranking 12 of the worst Marvel comics ever published. I went through everything, the issues, the sales data, the creator interviews, the fan fallout, and I'm gonna tell you not just what went wrong, but why it went wrong, and what it cost Marvel for years afterward. Number 1 is the story that should never have happened, and if you know your Marvel history, you already know exactly which one it is.
NFL SuperPro, 1991. Let's start with the one that's almost too easy, but can't be left off any honest list. NFL SuperPro is not a comic book. It's a 22-page corporate advertisement wearing a superhero costume. Marvel partnered with the NFL to create Phil Grayfield, a former football player who dons a high-tech suit and fights crime. The concept had all the creative passion of a legally binding contract, because that's basically what it was. Every story was cliched from page 1. Simple villains, zero stakes, nothing that would make anyone care about a character who existed purely to sell NFL merchandise. It gets worse. Issue 6 featured a storyline so offensive to the Hopi tribe that Marvel issued a formal apology and recalled 70,000 copies. 70,000! Writer Fabian Nicieza has since admitted the character was never cool enough and the project lacked any real creative passion. He said that himself. SuperPro is a useful case study in what happens when a licensing deal drives creative direction, instead of the other way around. Marvel was so eager to capitalize on the NFL partnership that nobody stopped to ask if there was a story worth telling here. There wasn't. This is the template for every soulless corporate crossover that came after it. It didn't just fail as a comic, it established a failure mode Marvel would repeat for decades. Canceled after 12 issues. Ungraded copies sell for about $3.20 today. The market has delivered its verdict. Skip it unless you enjoy comics as cautionary tales, which is mostly what we're doing today.
Avengers: The Crossing 1995. Now we get into the stories that actually damaged real characters. The Crossing is a 25-part event that revealed Tony Stark had been a secret sleeper agent for King the Conqueror since his very first appearance in the Marvel Universe. 30 years of character history, a double agent, the whole time. This wasn't a bold creative swing, it was a desperate sales grab dressed up as a revelation. During the event, Iron Man murdered several characters, including Rita Damara, the second Yellow Jacket, and Marilla, an Inhuman nanny. And then, to resolve the plot, Marvel brought in a teenage alternate timeline Tony Stark to fight the corrupted adult version. Teen Tony. That was the solution. The era lasted a few months before being quietly erased by the Onslaught event. The Crossing reveals something important about Marvel in the mid-90s. They were terrified. The X-Men were outselling everything. The Avengers were hemorrhaging readers. Editorial was willing to torch 30 years of character work for a sales spike. Here's the thing, it didn't even work. Monthly sales dropped from around 85,000 to 70,000 during the event. They blew up Iron Man's entire history and lost readers doing it. The murder of Rita Damara was never addressed. A character killed for a story that lasted months and was then erased from continuity. That is not storytelling. That is vandalism. Iron Man completionists only. Everyone else skipped directly to Hero's Return. That's what Marvel eventually decided to.
Uncanny X-Men: The Draco, 2003. Chuck Austin's run on Uncanny X-Men is one of the most consistently bad stretches in that title's history. The Draco is its lowest point. The arc revealed that Nightcrawler's father wasn't a demon, wasn't ambiguous, wasn't the compelling unknown. He was a mutant named Azazel from a race of demon-looking mutants in a hellish dimension. Presented as bold mythology. Remembered as the arc that gutted one of the most interesting characters in X-Men history. Nightcrawler's entire character is built on a specific irony. He looks like a devil, but he's a deeply faithful Catholic and one of the gentlest people in the Marvel Universe. That contradiction is the point. That tension is what makes him worth reading. The moment you make him the literal son of a demonic warlord, you don't add depth, you erase the dramatic tension that made him interesting. Austin didn't subvert the irony, he deleted it. The Draco isn't even the worst moment in this run. The same era features Angel and Husk engaging in mid-air sexual activity in front of her mother. That scene exists in a published comic. It has become shorthand in X-Men fan communities for a creative team that has completely lost the room. Austin was apparently going for soap opera drama. What he produced reads like a dare that someone unfortunately accepted. Read this only if you want to understand what the X-Men look like when handled by someone who doesn't understand why they work. Otherwise, go straight from Grant Morrison's New X-Men to Joss Whedon's Astonishing X-Men and never look sideways.
Civil War II, 2016. Let's talk about sequels nobody asked for. Civil War II pitted Carol Danvers against Tony Stark over whether to use an Inhuman's power of precognition to imprison people for crimes they hadn't yet committed. The original Civil War gave readers a genuine moral dilemma. This one had one correct answer, and Carol was on the wrong side of it from page 1. The characterization of Carol Danvers is the central disaster. She was written as an authoritarian who ignored due process and civil liberties to lock people up based on visions of the future. Fans who had watched her become a hero defined by earned confidence and moral clarity watched her become someone unrecognizable. The event felt engineered to create synergy with the Captain America Civil War film rather than to serve any story logic. It felt like a mandate handed down, not a story grown from character. The sales data says everything. Issue 1 sold 381,737 copies. Issue 2, 148,403. A 61% drop in a single month. Readers took one look at the actual story and walked. That kind of attrition in month 2 was a vote of no confidence so loud it should have been heard from every floor of the building. The event also ended with Tony Stark in a coma, meaning Iron Man was absent from Marvel's lineup at the exact moment MCU momentum was at its peak. The timing was genuinely stunning. The original Civil War is worth your time. This one isn't. If you want to understand who Carol Danvers actually is, start with Ms. Marvel Operation Lightning Storm. That's the real character.
Secret Empire 2017. This is the one that generated actual real-world protests outside Marvel's offices. Not metaphorical fan outrage, actual protests outside the building. Secret Empire revealed that Steve Rogers had secretly been a Hydra agent since childhood, his history rewritten by a cosmic cube. He then became the fascist dictator of the United States for 10 issues. The story ended with the real Steve Rogers emerging from the cosmic cube to punch the Hydra version. Literally. That was the resolution. Captain America was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, two Jewish men, specifically to punch Nazis. The character was born as an act of political defiance against fascism. Making him a fascist dictator wasn't just a bad creative choice. For a significant part of the readership, particularly Jewish fans, it was a betrayal of something that mattered culturally, not just commercially. The execution also failed on pure story terms. You can't spend 10 issues telling readers something is real and then resolve it with a cosmic cube deus ex machina. A magic clean copy is not an ending. IGN gave issue 1 an 8.9. By issue 10, that score had fallen to 5.1. The audience was genuinely willing to follow the premise. They gave Marvel months of benefit of the doubt. Marvel spent all of that goodwill and returned nothing. The concept of Hydra Cap could have worked as a standalone, clearly non-canon Elseworld story. In main continuity, running for a year, it became exhausting and offensive in equal measure. The Mockingbird tie-in arc is genuinely good. The core event doesn't earn the discomfort it asks of you. Read Ed Brubaker's Captain America run instead. That's the standard this story failed to meet.
Avengers number 200, 1980. This one is older. It is also one of the most morally indefensible single issues in Marvel's entire history. The fact that it appeared in a milestone, the 200th issue, meant as a celebration, makes it worse. The story follows Carol Danvers, then Ms. Marvel, who suddenly becomes pregnant and gives birth within days. The father is Marcus, son of Immortus, who reveals he abducted Carol, brainwashed her, and manipulated her into conceiving him while she was held captive in another dimension. Let's be precise about what this issue does. It depicts the rape and psychological manipulation of a superhero, and then has her teammates celebrate it as a romance. Captain America, Iron Man, Thor. The assembled Avengers stand there and wave goodbye as Carol leaves with the man who violated her. The story does not frame this as a problem. It frames it as a happy ending. Not one hero asks whether Carol is okay. Not one. Chris Claremont was so appalled he wrote Avengers Annual number 10 specifically to address it. Having Carol return, confront the team, and deliver one of the most searing indictments of a superhero group ever published in the medium. She refuses to forgive them. She walks away. It is extraordinary. And you have to read issue 200 to understand what Claremont was responding to. Claremont's Annual is one of the best pieces of editorial self-correction in comics history. It acknowledges the failure honestly and lets a character respond with genuine anger. The problem is that the original issue exists, was published, and reflects what happened when institutional blind spots in an all-male editorial room produce something this wrong without anyone asking a basic question. This is exactly what comics criticism is for. Read Avengers Annual number 10 first. It's the correction and it's great. Then read issue 200 if you need the context. The annual is the one that matters. Spider-Man Sins Past, 2004. We're deep in Spider-Man territory now, and it gets worse before we get to number 1. Sins Past revealed that Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker's first great love, the character whose death defined his career as Spider-Man, had secretly had an affair with Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. The resulting twins, rapidly aged by the Goblin formula, were now hunting Peter. That was the story. For decades, Gwen Stacy represented something specific in comics: the innocent, the loss that couldn't be undone, the tragedy that made Peter Parker understand what being a hero actually costs. To retroactively make her a woman who slept with his most hated enemy in secret while with Peter wasn't depth. Critics called it misogyny dressed up as revelation. The damage to her legacy was immediate and felt permanent. Writer J. Michael Straczynski pushed back against this plot. He wanted the children to be Peters, complicated but at least internally consistent with who Gwen was. Editor-in-chief Joe Quesada overruled him. The story that tarnished Gwen Stacy's legacy is one the writer didn't want to tell. It was forced through. It took Marvel 17 years to fully retcon it. In 2021, they explained the twins as a psychological illusion engineered by Mysterio and Harry Osborn. 17 years of continuity debt, carried by writers who had nothing to do with creating it. This is what the research means when it talks about the cost of bad editorial decisions being greater than the price on the cover. JMS's Amazing Spider-Man run has genuinely great stretches in the early going. Read those, then skip Sin's past entirely. Marvel eventually decided to, and they published it.
Ultimatum, 2009. Top 5. No more warm-up acts. Ultimatum ended the Ultimate Marvel Universe as a functioning creative line. Written by Jeff Loeb with art by David Finch, the story features Magneto flooding New York City and then systematically, brutally slaughtering most of the Ultimate roster. It is the definitive example of what comics readers call misery porn. The deaths weren't earned. They weren't meaningful. The Blob ate the Wasp. Giant Man decapitated the Blob in response. Characters that fans had followed for nearly a decade were killed in ways that had no emotional weight, no narrative purpose, and no relationship to who those characters actually were. It was a cull, not a story. Issue 1 was the best-selling comic of January 2009. The goodwill evaporated within months as readers realized there was nothing underneath the carnage. The Ultimate line had been one of the most exciting things in comics from 2000 to roughly 2006. Bendis' Ultimate Spider-Man, Millar and Hitch's Ultimates. These books brought in new readers and proved a separate continuity could work brilliantly. Ultimatum didn't just kill characters, it killed the creative promise of an entire imprint. The line limped along for a few more years, but the audience never returned at scale. A decade of world building earned for 5 issues of gratuitous violence. Read the original Ultimates and Ultimate Spider-Man through volume 12 or so. Then stop. Ultimatum is not a conclusion. It's a crime scene.
The Clone Saga, 1994 to 1996. The one that almost broke Spider-Man permanently. Not just the character, the entire franchise. The Clone Saga was planned as a 6-month story. It ran for over 2 years. The central twist, that the Peter Parker readers had followed since the mid-70s, was actually a clone, while the newly introduced Ben Reilly was the real Spider-Man, invalidated 20 years of reader investment in a single reveal. Then Marvel kept going, and going. The speculator boom convinced editorial that volume equals revenue. A contained story got extended every time the first wave of issues sold well, regardless of whether the story had anywhere to go. The result was a 2-year labyrinth of convoluted reveals, dead ends, and contradictions. Casual readers left first. Hardcore fans stayed out of resentment, and then left too. The Spider-Man line, one of the strongest in comics, became a punchline. The original Clone Saga from 1975 by Jerry Conway is actually a good story. Tight, emotionally resonant, thematically coherent. A story about identity and grief that genuinely works. The 1994 version took that concept and stretched it until it snapped. And by the time Marvel finally tried to end it, reader trust had been so eroded that confirming Peter as the real Spider-Man landed with exhaustion instead of relief. They had spent 2 years telling readers their investment didn't matter. That damage takes years to repair. The Clone Saga is cited as a direct contributor to the 90s industry collapse. Readers who left during this period did not all come back. The market contraction that followed nearly bankrupted Marvel. A comic book story caused measurable financial damage to its own publisher. Read the original 1975 arc by Jerry Conway. It's short and it's good. Skip everything from 1994 unless you're specifically studying the industry's worst impulses.
Marville 2002. Number 3 is special. It is the only entry on this list created specifically to prove a point, and which instead proved the exact opposite of that point. Marville was written by Bill Jamis, the president of Marvel Comics at the time. It started as a parody of Smallville featuring a time-traveling descendant of Ted Turner. It then became a vehicle for Jamis to publish his personal theories on God, evolution, and cultural anthropology. It concluded with issues that had essentially no connection to what came before. It is one of the most bewildering objects ever published by a major comics house. Critics at the time described it as, and I want to be precise, quote, shooting heroin directly into your adrenal gland, and, quote, insanely self-indulgent.
Jameis included back matter in the trade paperback explaining that he could publish whatever he wanted because he was the president of the company and didn't have to listen to bean counters. He published that in the comic for readers to find. The president of Marvel Comics wrote in a published book that he didn't need editorial feedback because of his job title. Marville was created as part of a bet with writer Peter David, the You Decide promotion, to see whose comic would sell more. Peter David's Captain Marvel won easily, but the more important context is what Marvel was supposed to launch, the Epic Comics imprint, which would have allowed creator-owned work to be distributed under Marvel's umbrella. That imprint collapsed in significant part due to the chaos surrounding Jameis's tenure. Marvel didn't just embarrass Marvel publicly, it may have cost independent creators a genuine publishing opportunity that never came back. Read it once with friends as an experience. It is a singular artifact. Then put it away. Ungraded copies sell for about $5. That is the most valuable Marvel has ever been. It is still $5.
Shadowland, 2010. We are down to the final two, and this next spot belongs to a story that derailed one of the most bulletproof tracks in modern comics. Daredevil has historically enjoyed an incredible run of high-quality storytelling. Ever since the character's 1998 relaunch under Kevin Smith, creative teams delivered iconic, grounded crime noir masterpieces. Until 2010. That is when Marvel Editorial looked at a brilliant street-level character and decided to violently shoehorn him into a massive supernatural crossover event. The result was Shadowland, a storyline widely considered the lone definitive disaster of the modern Daredevil era. The premise sees Matt Murdock take leadership of the ninja clan known as the Hand, construct a brutal fortress in Hell's Kitchen, and begin executing criminals. The core catastrophe of Shadowland is its total failure of character accountability. Watching a hero as morally rigid as Daredevil cross the line and become a murderer could have been an incredible, tragic character study. But instead of committing to the narrative weight of Matt's dark turn, Marvel panicked and pulled a massive cop-out. The story concludes with the cheap revelation that Matt wasn't actually acting of his own free will. He was possessed by an ancient demon called the Beast. This completely stripped Matt Murdock of his agency and accountability. By reducing a profound moral collapse down to a literal "the devil made me do it" excuse, the writers completely insulted the intelligence of the audience and erased the dramatic stakes of the entire arc. Shadowland didn't happen because a creator had an organic story to tell. It happened because Marvel was desperately chasing event-driven publishing dollars. Because event comics were selling exceptionally well at the time, Editorial mandated a fleet of completely unnecessary crossover tie-ins that were haphazardly slapped together. They took a focused, street-level crime drama and bloated it into a corporate cash grab. The fan fallout was immediate, and the legacy of the story hasn't improved with age. Even today, modern comic collectors picking up the massive Shadowland omnibus regularly warn others that the book is a uniquely bad, bloated mess.
Spider-Man One More Day, 2007. There is almost no one in Spider-Man fandom who hasn't heard of this story, because almost no one has forgiven it. One More Day ended the marriage of Peter Parker and Mary Jane Watson by having Peter make a deal with Mephisto, Marvel's devil, to erase their marriage from history. In exchange, Mephisto saves the life of Aunt May, who has been shot. Peter chooses to undo his marriage to save his elderly aunt. 20 years of shared continuity restructured. Brand new day begins. Peter Parker is defined by one thing above everything else: the acceptance of consequences. The death of Uncle Ben. The death of Gwen Stacy. His failures are permanent. They shape him. They are the cost of who he is. That weight is what makes him Spider-Man. One More Day is the story where Peter decides consequences don't apply to him if they're painful enough. He made a deal with the devil to avoid grief. That is not Spider-Man. That is the antithesis of Spider-Man. Marvel Editorial wanted to return Peter to permanent adolescent relatability, and they destroyed 20 years of earned character growth to do it. The individual issues sold enormously. Amazing Spider-Man number 544 moved 146,000 copies. But the Brand New Day era that followed averaged 66,886 copies per issue. A 30% collapse in the regular readership. A third of Spider-Man's audience looked at what came next and said no. They didn't come back. And the entire stated justification for doing this was to make Spider-Man more accessible and grow the audience. It made him less popular. The strategy failed on its own stated terms. J. Michael Straczynski was the writer. He has stated publicly that he asked Marvel to remove his name from the final issues. His own writer wanted his credit taken off the book he was writing. When the person who wrote it is asking not to be credited, that is not a review. That is a warning label. Read JMS's Amazing Spider-Man from the beginning through roughly issue 524. There is genuinely extraordinary Spider-Man in that stretch. Then stop. What comes after One More Day is not Spider-Man. It is Marvel Editorial's idea of Spider-Man, which has always been a different and lesser thing.
Every story on this list happened when editorial priorities overruled creative logic, when the publisher decided what they needed a story to do and reverse engineered the character to justify it. Every time Marvel has done that, readers have walked. The data is consistent across 4 decades. Shock value rents readers. Character earns them. Marvel has kept having to relearn that lesson. One More Day is the worst Marvel comic ever published. Not because it has the worst art, not because it caused the most commercial damage, though it caused significant damage. Because it is the clearest example of Marvel editorial deciding that 20 years of character growth can be deleted when the people in charge don't like where the story went. Spider-Man survived the Clone Saga. He survived sins past. He has never fully recovered from One More Day. Check the sales data. That is not an opinion. That is history. Tell me where I'm wrong. Is One More Day really worse than the Clone Saga? Should Ultimatum be in the top 3? Drop your own ranking in the comments. I read every one. And if enough of you make a compelling enough case, I'll do a full response video. If you want comic rankings that actually dig into the history and don't just dunk for the algorithm, subscribe. The best Marvel Comics list is coming next, and I promise it's going to surprise you.